Hello, this is Dr. Flight. This is a short presentation on brand positioning. And when we think about positioning, what we want to think about is where our product, our brand, our firm is in relation to our competitors in the mind of the consumer. So if we think about our customer, or our customer market segment, or the customers who we want to try to approach, what we want to do is we want to think about, we want to measure, and we want to identify where our brand is in their minds. And then what we want to do is try to move that position into the most advantageous place so that the customer will want to buy our product. So the process of doing this is illustrated very well when we use the technique of perceptual mapping. So this presentation will talk a lot about just the general concepts of perceptual mapping and some of the steps that are involved in the mapping process. And then what we want to do is think about how we can use the map to form a strategy to, again, position our brand in the mind of the consumer, kind of where they think we belong and where we want to belong relative to our competition in order for them to want to buy our product. Okay, so brand positioning, this was just a short presentation on that topic. Okay, so as we begin to move forward in the segmenting, targeting, and positioning process, positioning is the last element that we're going to think about here. And as we have segmented, we've regrouped our consumers into various homogeneous groups, and we've targeted a specific segment or segments which make sense for our company because they're profitable and they have good fit and we think we can reach them. Now we need to actually measure our relationship to our competitors in the minds of the consumers. And so ideally we want to be able to bring a product to the market segment that they want, but we need to first kind of understand how they view us to begin with. So that's the idea of this positioning concept. So we want to be able to, number one, understand what our customers expect, need, and desire, and then we want to understand how we currently do or perform relative to what those needs and wants are. So ideally here we want to measure and place our product in the mind of the consumer. And when we do the positioning process, this is really a function of earlier when we talked about the differentiation orientation and this notion that when we compete, what we want to try to do is find points of difference between our product and our competitors' products. And by doing so, we can encourage our consumers to buy our products for the reasons of difference or the points of difference that we find between us and again our competition. So as you think about how we can define ourselves as being different, a lot of times we look at product attributes or product features. There are all kinds of other ways, though, that we can find points of difference too, which the consumer may pick up on, or ones that we could promote or build awareness around. Again, that demonstrates how we are different and we can form a competitive advantage through our differences. So it may be that we have a specific price point. Maybe that we're either a value brand or a prestige brand, and we identify ourselves by the type of price that we offer, by the type of innovations and the product characteristics that we have. It may be an image-related issue where we have a product or brand personality and we're creating an image and we're the leader or the progenitor of the image category. It might be, again, the type of products that we offer, the features, the benefits, the characteristics, the quality maybe. and so forth. And so it could be service, it could be a service-oriented type of a thing that we have that our competitors don't have, and so on. So as you think about how we are perceived by the market segment that we're wanting to target, what we want to think about is, what are we known for? What are we good at? What can we convey to our customers that sets us apart in a positive way from our competitors? And it can be in a lot of different areas of the firm or a lot of different dimensions. It doesn't just have to be price, it doesn't just have to be like the number of features that we have. It could be the fact that we are the innovators in the industry, or it could be the fact that we give outstanding customer service, better than anybody else. Like, think about the Disney Corporation or Disney World, the theme park. Everybody knows that it is expensive to go to Disney. The Disney, like if you want to spend a day at Disney and ride the rides and go to the park and experience what's there, it is absolutely expensive. It is not inexpensive. It's very, very costly. Yet, most people who go to Disney and experience the theme park say nothing but good things about it. There's almost no negative transfer from cost to actual experience. And most people come away with the experience saying, wow, that was like worth the money. It was expensive, but it was worth it. And so, like, they may not be a price leader, right? Because they're not the cheapest, they're not the least expensive, but their service is outstanding. The personal relationships they develop with their guests while they're there is outstanding. What they do is set at such a high level of excellence that the customer truly feels like it's the best experience around. And so they have claimed a leadership position, and kind of in the minds of the consumers, they're not the least expensive, but it's well worth the investment if somebody spends their money on it. So that's the way that they've found to set themselves apart from others in the theme park industry. And it creates a very special perceptual image that the customers have of them. So that's where we want to think about. That's kind of the idea of positioning. We want to be able to note points of difference. And there are some tools that we have, and one in particular is something called a perceptual map. So there are going to be some steps that we'll take specifically in the research side of things to form a perceptual map. And these are very specific notions. So there are going to be 3 items here that we'll look at. The first item, when we start to do positioning and engaging in a positioning study of some type, is to talk to customers. Sometimes we do this through surveys, sometimes we do it through focus groups or interviews. But what we want to do is we want to identify within our market segment what features or what attributes are important to the customer in order for them to make a purchase or to buy the product. So we call these things specifically determinant attributes. So if it's important to the customer, if like price is important, or if the number of features on the product is important, or if delivery is important, or if having a customer relationship is important, or feeling safe is important. Those are all different elements that might be included in the value proposition. But what we want to do is we want to determine which elements are the ones that help drive a purchase decision. If that's the case, it's called a determinant attribute, and so that's what we want to think about. The next thing what we want to do is, once we know what the determinant attributes are, number 2 is we need to go out and we need to survey customers, and we need to measure specifically how we perform on those determinant attributes and how our competitors also perform on them. Okay, so we need to know from the consumer's perspective, like on a scale, how well we do and how well our competitors do on the determinant attributes used to decide whether they're going to make the purchase decision or not. The other thing that we want to do is we want to measure our consumers' level of interest of importance for each attribute as well. Okay, so this will be actually something that we may have already done in the in the segmenting process. Remember, back in segmenting, we're looking at what consumers' needs and wants are. So it may very well be that we have this information already, and we already have the level of expectation the market segment has, the customer has on each determinant attribute that we're examining. But it's important here to get a measure both from the customer in terms of what is important to them and how they perceive the industry players, our competitors and ourselves, as performing on those specific elements. The third thing that we want to do is we want to do some detailed statistical analysis to identify how far away and how different or distant our competitors are from each other and how they perform relative to our customer expectations. Now, there's statistical analyses that can be done to do this. It can include discriminant analysis. It can include cluster analysis. It can include multidimensional scaling and some other techniques like that. So those are all statistical techniques that we use to determine the distance between competitors and the customers in terms of what the expectations are and what performance is. The other thing that we do is we often, in conjunction with those statistical techniques, is we also plot or graph somehow the relationships that these have. So here's an example of some plots or some graphs that we can look at. We have here a generic price quality perceptual map. Now, what we're doing here is we're saying quality and price are two different determinant attributes, and you'll see that these form the axes of the perceptual map. So quality is one determinant attribute, price is a second, and they're being used here to form the axes of the perceptual map. And what we want to do is we want to place ourselves and our competitors, and we want to look at market segments, and we want to see how they fit onto these two axes after we collect our data. And, you know, if we have high quality and high price, that's kind of expected, right? So, you know, if you have higher quality, it's going to cost you more to produce the product. So you would be expected to charge more. And if you're the consumer, if you're getting more in terms of quality, you'd expect to have to pay more. So this is kind of a feasible position to be in. Somewhere in the middle maybe too. And then of course down here, you might have a value option where the product is offered and it doesn't have a lot of features in it, or maybe the quality isn't particularly high, but the price is lower. So you have a different market segment that would be interested in this type of a product, and you have market segments all across here, but they vary by how much quality and how much price they would be expected to pay. So this is like a generic, a lot of firms will just jump right in and do a price quality perceptual map. It's a very common map to create using price and quality as the determinant attributes. However, those are not the only determinant attributes you could use. Here's another example of a hotel industry, and we have a hotel that offers a lot of personal service. They have a concierge, they have a lot of relationship building they do. They have full service, so you get lots and lots of options, like service options at the hotel. The other dimension here that they have is location. So we have a business district location and we have an airport location. So these are two different locations. So we have a location determinant attribute and we have a service determinant attribute. And so those are the two determinant attributes that are used to define this particular space. And now we have some competitors that have been measured, hotels A, B, C, and D, and we see that A is close to the business district and they have a moderate level of full service. C is somewhere between the business district and the airport, and they have a full service offering. D is probably, they may be located close to C in location, but the level of service they offer is very low. Now, it's probably a lower priced type of a location, and this is C is probably a higher priced type of a location. And then we have B, which again is kind of, it is a basic service offer, but it's at the airport. So presumably we'd have different market segments that would be attracted to either the airport or the business district, and they would either want a lot of service, full service, or low service or basic service. And that's how we're determining kind of the perception of our competitors and ourselves using these two determinant attributes. Here's another example. We have sports cars. So we have prestige as a determinant attribute, and we have sportiness as a determinant attribute. You might assume that sportiness and prestige go together, but not necessarily. Cadillacs are very prestigious, but they aren't necessarily sporty. There are, like the Mazda Miatas are fairly sporty cars, but they're not necessarily very prestigious. So we have different varying degrees of like levels of prestige and then levels of sportiness. And of course, we have different competitors marked here, A, B, C, D. And again, we'd presumably have different markets that would desire different levels of this. Another example we have here would be beer types by product, and in this case we have two different determinant attributes. One would be focused on price, and specifically the way price is defined here is we have budget offerings and then we have premium offerings. So we have lower priced on budget, higher priced on premium. And then we have kind of the style of beverage or beer here, heavy beers or light beers. So this might be a calorie count or something relating to the flavor or the heaviness or this of the beer and flavor, or again calorie types of counts. And we actually have Old Milwaukee Light, we have Miller Lite, we have Coors Light, kind of on the lower end here. Michelob tends to be perceived as a less filling or a lighter type of a beer. And then we have heavier beers up above here. On the right hand side, we have ones that tend to be more expensive or perceived as more premium, so maybe harder to find, less available, more unique. Down here we have the volume beers, we have the budget beers, which will be less expensive. So again, we have marked specifically here where these brands all form, and this would be, the plots here would be as a result of market research. We would do market research. We would measure our consumers' perceptions of these brands and then place them on here. So this is an example, again, the determined attributes of budget versus premium, so some type of a pricing issue, and then product feature would be heavy or light. And then we've gone out and collected the data, and we've gone ahead and mapped it. Now, what we can also do is we can, remember, we want to collect data from the perspective of the customer in relation to the brand, but we also want to measure the perception of the customers in relation to market segment too. So here we have different types of consumers or market segments that we've identified, probably through our segmentation process and the needs in which they have. And now we have these on the same axes that we had before. We have people or customers who desire a full-bodied beer. The blue-collar customers, however we've defined them, we probably looked at some psychographic features to define them. We have markets who want a good value in their beer. Maybe so they're not necessarily needing high quality, they just want good value. Truly people who are on a budget but who want a light beer. People who want pale colored beers, and so on and so forth. People who are dining out, they're willing to spend a little bit more, but they don't want to have a heavy feeling. and so on. Okay, so we have different market segments that are defined on this particular map, but we're still using the determinant attributes of budget or premium price and then product quality, heaviness, or lightness. Now what we can do is something called a joint space map, where we combine both our competitors and or the industry and the market. So we have Old Milwaukee and Meisterbrow, and we see that the blue collar consumer is sort of in this area here, as well as the good value consumer. And so what we would probably say is these customers, these market segments are going to be attracted to these offerings in the marketplace, these products. We have heavy users and popular with men, and we have the Budweiser and the Miller area, special occasions, popular with women brands, might be in here along with the less filling group. And so we can kind of begin to start saying, well, look, if I've got a market segment, and this is like, say, maybe I want to target the blue collar market segment, then I know that my competitors are going to be Old Milwaukee and Meisterbrow. And so I need to think of them as my direct competitors. And I need to see how I can compete with them for this market segment's dollar. And that's how I approach this. So when I think about strategy, I'm going to look for competitors who I'm going to face in direct competition, and I'm going to try to take market share away from them. I'm also going to look for areas here. So there might be an area here where there's a gap. So there's a gap here, and I might be able to take advantage of this gap somehow, where there's no other competitors, and maybe draw some customers over there. Or maybe there's a gap here, and I could take these good value type of customers. I might be able to focus on them, or I might be able to find a gap in here or something along those lines. So I either look for gaps or I look for competitive environments where I will be able to take market share away from those products that are already sort of in that area. Now, moving forward, there are some issues as we look to place our products on this particular map. So there are some specific things called positioning errors that we need to be concerned about. You can either position yourself as an under-positioned product or an over-positioned product, and these are both problematic. Under-positioning happens when we do not clearly identify the benefit or the feature for a customer to buy. So when you under position, it means that your product is too generic for the particular market, and nobody really knows that it's for them. When you over position, it means that you position too strongly or too narrowly. So over positioning is too narrow of a focus, and under positioning is a focus that's not strong or clear enough. Two more cases here: confused and doubtful positioning happens. Confused positioning happens when you try to make more claims than could be substantiated, and it doesn't make sense. So like, for instance, if I have a high quality product but I price it low, that doesn't really make sense. Usually high quality products are priced high, and the consumers expect to pay more if the quality is higher. But if I price low, the consumer is not going to believe that I have good quality, or they're going to be confused as to why they would pay less for something that is clearly better. Now, this might not be necessarily a bad thing, but it's certainly going to be confusing. Doubtful positioning is when you try to make a claim that simply is hard to believe. So like, if I have a real dark colored beer and I claim that it's light, or less calories, or light, or not heavy. Most people associate dark beers with heaviness and high calories and stuff. It'd be like if Guinness came out with a light beer. people would be doubtful that that is truly their position that they are, just because it doesn't make sense for them, and it's somewhat unbelievable. So doubtful positioning is when you make claims that customers don't think are true. Okay, so this has been a little bit of a discussion on positioning. We spent a lot of time talking about perceptual maps, the 3 big steps involved with perceptual mapping, and understanding what determining attributes are, and very importantly, understanding what a joint space map is where we position both market segments and we position products on the map simultaneously so that we can make a strategic decision as to where we want to be relative to our competition and relative to gaps in the gaps in the map that might suggest there are markets that are being underserved. Okay, so that finishes up positioning.